In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the fuel tank on this Toyota Tacoma. Let's install this TRQ tank. Now with the vehicle running, I know it's off for me, but this is for demonstrational purposes only. Come over to the driver's side fender here. You'll see behind your battery, this is your main junction box or fuse box in the engine bay. The fuel pump or electronic fuel injection fuse is going to be labeled here as a 20 amp fuse, so pop the cover up and off. What I'm going to do is take this fuse puller. I'm going to remove this fuse. You want to do this while the engine is running. This will shut the fuel pump off, but with the engine running, it will actually suck the fuel pressure out of the rail while it's running, and that will allow us to not have any fuel spilling everywhere, well, minimal fuel spilling when removing fuel lines. So with that fuse puller, just wiggle it back and forth. Sometimes these fuses are stuck in here. Remove the fuse. At this point, the engine will shut off. I'm going to set this in here safely. We're going to put it on later, and now we can continue with our job. Let's disconnect the negative battery terminal. Use a 10mm wrench, put it on the mounting nut. My terminal is a little bit loose here, so I'm going to have to address that. But once this is loose, you can pull the negative terminal off and set it to the side so it cannot make connection. As you can see, the filler neck connects right here, so you don't have to take the fender liner down for this to disconnect it, but I will. I believe that it makes a lot more space, and it's going to be a lot easier to disconnect the two hoses. There's not just this, there's one behind it, so I'm going to take it down, but like I said, you don't have to. To remove this fender liner, you have several push clips that go all along, as well as two screws that go into the quarter panel here, or the side of the bed actually. So take a trim tool. You might need a pick to pick these out as you prime out, and hopefully yours don't break. A lot of these do end up breaking when you remove them, so try to be gentle. If you break them, just have new ones on hand to replace them so you can secure the fender liner properly at the end. Just go along the entire liner here, pry them all out. There are also some push clip retainers on the inside of the liner. Oops, that one broke. That one as well, and another one right over here. At this point, you can pry this away and pull it down. I'm not removing the entire thing, so it's not coming off. I'm just pulling it down to get better access. Just like that. Now with the fender liner moved out of the way, you can see if you follow the filler neck, there's one clamp right here. This holds the main filler neck hose. There's another one right back there. We're going to get to that in a minute. Let's start with the first one. Should be a 10mm socket on this. Mine is extremely rusty. I'm going to replace the clamp at the end. Thankfully, it's breaking free, so that's a plus. If yours isn't breaking free, try to spray it with rust penetrant, work it back and forth, and if really it's not moving, you might end up having to cut it. But try your best to save it and take it off the right way. You don't have to remove it completely. All you have to do is loosen it up enough to release pressure off of the hose here. To get this off, a lot of times it gets stuck, so what I'm going to do is take a pick and try to push the hose off of the filler neck itself. Be gentle not to break the hose, of course. There we go. Doing this should allow me to pull it straight off. Just like that. All right, I'm gonna have to set this aside like that. Might as well remove my clamp at this point so I can replace it. Get a nice new one. And now, let's do the same to this clamp over here. This one is even worse condition, so I'm gonna try my best. Should be a 10mm socket on this. All right, finally got this one as well. Gonna move the clamp out of the way, and let's do the same to this. Pry it down, grab a pick if needed to get it unstuck. And there it is. I'm gonna remove this clamp as well. I'm gonna get my socket off of here and replace the clamp. Let's remove the hose clamp off of this line. Give it a twist. Sometimes they're really stuck on there, so you might need a pair of pliers to grab onto it. Twist it with that very carefully, not to break the line or the hose. You just want to break it free. There we go. That broke free. And now I'm going to stick a pick in here, spray it with a little bit of rust penetrant. Hopefully that'll work its way in there. The pick should allow it to break free. There we go. It's spinning a little bit more freely now. So all we have to do is, there we go, pull it off. Leave it there. Moving on to the next one. This right here, this clip, you're going to want to pry it up and off, just like that. Remove it from the line. This is your main feed line. It has pressure in it, well, had, as long as you pulled that fuse. So, but there is still fuel in it, so careful when you unplug it. When you disconnect it, it might spray a little bit. There we go. Leave that there. Last one is going to be this hose over here. Pinch the clamp, pull it back. Get that pick in here with some rust penetrant. Give this a twist and pull it straight off. There we go. Let's support the tank. If you're on the ground, use whatever you have to support it. And if you're on the lift, use a fuel tank support attachment, which I have here. Put a little bit of pressure on it, not much, just enough to hold it so that we can start unbolting it safely. 3 12mm bolts hold it on at the front. Remove all 3. Take this shield as well. Remove this 14mm bolt that holds the strap on the outer part of the strap here on the frame. Make sure it's separated. Obviously it did. Pull it down a little bit. On the other side of the strap, you'll see this retainer that is locking it in. We have to pry up on one side. It's kind of like a hook. Push it out. There we go. And then slide the pin out. Comes out through the other side. All right, once you get that out, take it down, and there it is. Let's lower the fuel tank a little bit. Don't go too far though, it still has an electrical connector. It's for the fuel pump. So after I went down a little bit, I'm gonna stick some pliers up there and disconnect that pump connector. It's also clipped in on a wiring harness here. You're gonna have to squeeze in on this tab and pull it up. There we go. Now let's just disconnect it from this retainer. Pop that off. And finish lowering the tank. At this point, I'm going to remove all the 8mm headed bolts that hold on this fuel pump assembly here. You can use a Phillips head as well, but a lot of times it's easier to just use an 8mm. Also, I recommend against the use of electric tools at this point. There's fuel vapors everywhere, and the electric tools can make sparks, so you want to avoid that. Pry it up and out. there's a lot of debris, shake it off. There it is. Let's remove the 4 Phillips head screws that hold on this part. Now let's pinch on this retainer, push it through, and remove this whole piece here, set it aside, take the gasket out. Ideally you'd want to replace this, but if you have to reuse it, well, do your best. And now we have to remove this. I'm going to stick my hand underneath, push it through, there it is. Go over to the new one and line this up, drop it down. It's going to have 2 little tabs on the side, and you'll see that the cutout isn't even. Tabs go on each side of where the cutout curves out. There we go. Put that gasket back down, and the gasket will have 2 little pins that line up with this cover. Snap that retainer in, line up the cover, and let's drop in the screws again, and let's tighten up these screws. Start one at a time. Don't tighten any of them until they're all in, just in case you have to move this around to line it up. When you snug this up, just give it about 1/8 of a turn after it starts bottoming out and getting snug, so that all you have to do is basically just squish that gasket down a little bit. You don't want to break these screws, they're small. There we go, that's installed. Use a 10mm socket. In my case, I'm going to have to tap it on here to get these clamps off. There we go. Let's do the same to this one. This one's in worse condition. Use some pliers very gently if you have to break the hose free. There we go. Pull it off. Perfect. If needed, replace either of these, but mine are in good condition. All I'm going to replace is the clamps. Let's get the hoses reattached to the new tank. Slide it all the way down, and I have this new clamp. Tighten this up. When tightening these, keep in mind that you don't want to completely crush them down. As soon as it starts squeezing on the hose, which is right about here, just go a little bit more, maybe about 1/2 a turn at most. If you can't spin this by hand, then it's plenty tight. You don't need to crush this, otherwise it will damage the hose and potentially strip out the clamp, and then you'll need a new one. Slide on the other hose. Same applies to this clamp. Once it starts squeezing on the hose, leave it. That's perfect right there. Now you need to transfer your fuel to one tank from the other. You can do this multiple ways. You could clean the tank, dump it with a funnel, or you could use a fuel-rated transfer pump. Whatever you have to do, but transfer the fuel from one to the other. Now remove your gasket, get a new one if needed, but you can reuse these if you're careful with them. Line up the gasket, make sure it's the same as it was before. Take the fuel pump assembly, slide it down in. Make sure that gasket stays in place. It does have 3 little pins that it has to line up with. That goes through the top of the pump. Press this down, and now reinstall all the bolts that hold this on. Don't tighten them yet, just get them all started. That way this can seat evenly. I'm also going to go in a cross pattern to make sure that it's sitting flat before I completely tighten this down. Okay, this is the last one. They're all started, they're all snugged. I'm going to use a Phillips head screwdriver to tighten them, that way I don't accidentally over tighten them. And I'm just going to snug them back and forth in a cross pattern. These don't have to be extremely tight. They're very small and it's very easy to either break them or strip them out. So I'm just going to go about a quarter turn after they get snug. That should be plenty tight. Now double check them all. Just feel them out to make sure they're all about the same tightness. There we go, that's installed. Let's bring the tank back up. As you do this, pay attention to all of your lines and make sure that nothing gets caught. Before you go all the way up, reconnect that fuel pump. Take that plug, connect it, make sure it clicks. There we go. And re-secure it. Just like that. Now let's bring the tank all the way up. All right, let's reconnect the lines here, starting with this one. Doesn't really matter which one you start with. Re-secure the clamps. If you need to replace any of them, go ahead. These, make sure they go back where they belong and you don't accidentally put them on backwards. Not that you can, but just pay attention. This one here needs to click. Once it clicks in place, just take that lock, slide it over. You have to open it up and slide it up and around and make sure that it's seated. You should not be able to pull this line off. Line up the bolt holes here. Don't forget about the shield that goes in like this to protect the fuel tank from any debris that flies at it as you're driving. I'm going to start with the center one, that way I pretty much line up this fuel tank. The center one goes through the shield, so you don't have to have that shield on yet. Now take the shield and line it up with the bolt holes. Start tightening everything. Snug these all up. Torque these to 20 foot-pounds. Let's bring the strap up, have that pin ready, and slide them all together here, just like that. Don't forget about that cotter pin that locks in the pin. There we go, get that locked in. Fold this up and around the fuel tank and line it up with the bolt hole. On the other side, get that bolt through the strap and into the mounting hole. Torque this to 30 foot-pounds. Now remove whatever support you are using. Now let's bolt it onto the bracket down here. Snug this up. There we go. Just squish this bracket down a little bit. It's kind of like a layered piece here. And once you feel that it's snug, give it about 1/8 of a turn. That should be plenty tight for this. Now to reconnect the filler neck hoses, I'm going to start with the smaller one back there, just because it's going to be a little difficult to reach once I put the main filler neck hose in place. Slide those on. There we go. I have new clamps on both of these. Make sure they bottom out, or at least kind of fall into place where they're supposed to. Let's tighten up these clamps. They're a little bit difficult to get to. Once it starts squishing the hose a little bit, stop there. You don't want to damage the hose or strip out the clamp. All right, that's snug. Let's get the other one. This one you can get with a socket. And same thing, just snug it up until it starts squeezing the hose. That's plenty tight right there. Can't spin the hose, so we're good to go. Let's reinstall the fender liner. Make sure it lines up everywhere. That way it can fall into place. All right, I'm going to start with the push clips that go up in here. And these over here, just press them in. If yours broke, source new ones. That way this fender liner can be properly secured. And the two screws at the top. Just make these snug. There you go. Now that the job is done, reinstall this fuse. Put your fuse puller back. Put the cap back on. Make sure that clicks and is seated. At this point, let's reconnect the battery and turn the engine on. Let's reconnect the battery. Take that negative terminal, put it on. Might make a little spark, and then tighten it up. And you want to make sure that you don't over tighten it, otherwise it can stretch the terminal. And once you feel it bottom out about here, just give it a little extra. Now, this terminal is in very poor condition, but usually you should not be able to move it around at all. If you can't spin it, kind of like this, you know that it's tight enough. Now let's cycle the key to the on position and back off several times. This is going to prime the fuel system. It's going to allow that pump to run, push fuel through the lines, and get all the air out. Once you've done that a few times, start the engine. It may sputter a little bit as it works the fuel or the air out of the fuel lines, but it should start. There you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.